Genocide. Death. A violent, coordinated extermination of a group of people. The Holocaust. Here, you see a tribute outside of the Holocaust Museum in Houston, Texas, that represents the destroyed communities during the Holocaust. 11 million people were targeted and killed based on things they couldn't control. What could possibly make a human being hate others so much? What inspired Adolf Hitler's dream of a world wiped clean of imperfectness? The Trail of Tears. I'm Skylar Jones, and today we will be discussing whether or not the removal of the Native Americans from their homelands should be considered genocide. The time is 1830. Mexico has just won its independence from Spain. Stephen F. Austin has founded a colony in Texas. The Oregon Trail has become the main route for travelers heading west. Manifest Destiny is in full swing, and Andrew Jackson is President of the United States and is working on something that nowadays we would consider unthinkable.
He was going to force thousands of men, women, and children out of their homes to now Oklahoma, a place that no one would want to move to at that time if given a choice.
The trek was long and harsh. Many died along the way from diseases. Others died from dehydration, starvation, and overexertion. The elderly and children were the most common to die along the journey, leaving the Indians coming into a strange, inhabitable land with no past and no future. But it is now the future, and I am a Choctaw Indian, living and breathing. My fourth time's grandmother, Amy Folsom, traveled the Trail of Tears, so for me, this debate hits a little closer to home. But was the removal of Native Americans an act of genocide? Yes, it was tragic and based on paperwork never should have happened. But is the blood of thousands of Native Americans on the U.S. government's hands?
To further understand, let's talk a bit more about what the term genocide actually means.
The actual term genocide wasn't around before 1944. Geno means race or tribe, and side means death. The definition of genocide is any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group, of which A, B, C, and E are true when you compare it to the Trail of Tears. Dr. Ian Thompson, the director of the Historical Preservation Department for the Choctaw Nation, believes that the removal of his people should be considered genocide. In my interview with him, he said, "It was one part of a coordinated plan to destroy everything that made the Choctaw tribe unique as people. What makes an act of genocide is that it was part of a broader colonial program intended to destroy the Choctaw people."
The removal of the Native Americans from their homelands was based solely on the U.S. government wanting to save money. The loss of life wasn't on their mind. Gary Spring of the Historic Preservation Department of the Choctaw Nation thinks that much could have been done to prevent such loss.
The government would bring Choctaws close to these areas with disease and then be delayed for several days to weeks to allow the illness to spread. Overall, it is estimated that 20% to 25% of the Choctaws passed away. This is directly due to the negligence of the U.S. government.
But it wasn't just the Choctaw that suffered. The Cherokee, Muskogee, Seminole, and Chickasaw were also forced from their homes. And because of these acts against the Native Americans, it dominoed into a world affair, killing millions.
The Indian removal policy created by Jefferson that led up to the Indian Removal Act inspired Adolf Hitler's practices of the Holocaust and the genocide of the Jewish people. Another dark part of not just American history, but world history as a whole. Ryan Springs said this in an interview I conducted.
I do believe that the removal of the Native Americans from their homelands was a genocide inflicted by the U.S. government. But you may ask, now what?
In my interview, Chief Gary Batten of the Choctaw Nation says we must show love and grace to all people for things that have happened in the past. We cannot judge people for what their forefathers have done, just like we don't want them to judge us. We can't change the past, and we don't need to forget it. We do need to look to the future with an open heart and mind, while being cautious and listening to our hearts about what people have the right spirit about them.
I want you to stop what you're doing and imagine that the government is going to force you to walk halfway across the country, and all that you can take is as much as you can carry. On the way there, your family dies. That's what genocide does. Genocide is happening all over the world right now, and it's even happened here. I'm Skylar Jones, and remember, end genocide.